Go. Welcome to this episode of Lead the Machine podcast, where today's leaders and tomorrow's talk about the human side of AI at work. I'm your host, Kirsten Marr, and fortunate to have today's guest on Lead the Machine, Matt Mosher. Currently, Matt is a board member of Pharmacists Mutual Insurance Company and a strategic advisor to Stony Brook Capital. He is best known for his 29 years at AM Best Rating Services, the leading firm that issues credit strength ratings for insurance companies. It's kind of a big deal. Matt served as president and chief executive officer from 2019 to 2024. His career at AM Best, though, started in 1995, where he held various managerial roles, including chief operating officer. Making up nearly 40 years in the insurance industry, Matt spent 2 years in consulting and 7 years at Crum & Forrester Insurance Company before joining AM Best. Matt is a thought leader, speaking on a wide array of industry issues and trends. He is a vocal advocate to educate students about career opportunities in insurance. I have a lot of respect for the passion Matt shows to grow and develop talent and to push the industry to evolve, innovate, and modernize. Listen, we all need insurance to own a home or a car or to start and run a business. It's imperative that insurance serves its customers and delivers on the promise of providing a safety net when catastrophe strikes. I'm also appreciative and honored for the ways Matt and I have been able to partner on both industry innovation and talent. From my time at Valen Analytics, we were early providers of predictive analytics, which required a lot of educating the industry about the benefits for insurers and policyholders to make pricing and product offerings more accurate. Matt understood the power of advanced data analytics and worked with us to help educate his staff to properly assess how insurance companies were building and deploying predictive models. He also generously came and spoke at our annual conference for many years. And that was a big deal at the time, and it helped build momentum. It helped build the case for the value predictive analytics can add, not for any one product or solution, but for data science as a whole. And then we partnered on a global talent initiative that just celebrated 10 years, along with organizations like the industry trade group APCIA and the HR firm Jacobson Group. This is one of the coolest things I have been a part of. We have a grassroots initiative called the Insurance Careers Movement, the aim being to share with young professionals the variety and innovative careers possible in this industry. Every year, 1,000 organizations across 20 countries participate to raise awareness and take action to develop talent within their own companies, partner with education, local governments, and industry groups. It's inspiring and a rewarding thing to see CEOs embrace talent as a strategic priority. So, Matt, turning it to you, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the audience and share your career journey, and of course, include how talent and insurance are a family business in the Mosher household.
Well, thanks, Christian. I appreciate you having me on. And you went through the timeline of my career, but it goes back to my first year in college, where I started out as a computer science major and said to myself after getting headaches in my first semester, I can't sit in front of a computer the rest of my life. Well, we all know how that turns out for everybody nowadays with computers out there. But I was lucky to have somebody tell me about the actuarial programs and actuarial exams that got me into the insurance industry. And what I found was an industry, you mentioned everybody needs insurance. It also goes the flip way. Insurance needs every type of talent. And there's so many opportunities in the insurance industry that are out there. I've always been one that thought, everybody should look at it from the perspective, if you're good at math, there's things that you can do, engineering, accounting, even the marketing side and the business side of insurance. There's so much people can do. So I've always been, trying to push people towards insurance. I'm not sure why. I think mainly because I've had such a great experience in the industry. And as you mentioned with my family, I must have been fairly positive at the dinner table. I do have three boys. All three boys are in the insurance industry and have progressed through the actuarial exams to certain levels with each of them. And I think they all too enjoy the insurance industry. Part of it too is if you want to help people, you look at the insurance industry, and the insurance industry is always out there. I had the unfortunate experience of representing my family when our summer house burnt down, and the morning after it burnt down, I went up and met the uh, insurance adjuster who had a full claims limit check waiting for me, and it just shows the way the insurance industry really is there to serve you when you need it. Everybody thinks, oh, I got to write that premium check. But that's not what insurance is about. It's really being there when people have a time of need. And I hear many CEOs make the point when somebody has a claim, that's when we prove our worth. And that really is, you talk about the storms and the wildfires in California this year. The insurance industry proves their worth when those events are there and they show up and are helping people. So the insurance industry has always been important to me. And it's, as I said, I must have talked fairly positively to my kids about it. So it's worked out well for me and my family.
It's a good thing. And it's good to know the way you said it. Your kids chose to do it, right? Based
I
on hearing, what
I
you
didn't
had to
push
say.
them in any way, shape, or form. It took me a long time to finish the actuarial exams. I would have thought they would have thought twice about taking the exams, but they all have taken the challenge.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, move a little bit into the bird's eye view that you have being at AM Best for nearly 3 decades.
Hmm.
For those who may not know the insurance industry or may not really understand, you can explain better than I, but when you are in charge of the credit ratings for an insurance institution, they are there to show you all the things that they're doing in their business, to show you how they're dealing with issues, how they're going to be a sustainable organization, because you can't deliver on the promise of insurance if you go insolvent.
Yep.
So it's imperative that insurance companies, like banks, are financially secure. And that means a whole lot of things in terms of resiliency and stability. It can make innovation a little bit harder. Like there's a reason that insurance is called a laggard industry, but there are some reasons for that. Nonetheless, you also have to innovate and stay current with what's going on. And so it's the conundrum, right? That an industry that needs to be really stable, it also needs to take risks and be innovative. So let's talk about the patterns that you've seen
Right.
nearly 3 decades in. Something you have said that I've always resonated with is innovation is less about the size of the company and more about the mindset. So when you think about company mindset, how do you separate companies into different types of mindsets and appetites for innovation?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's something that we look at all along. And when you think of an insurance financial strength rating, you can think kind of like a Standard and Poor's or Moody's debt rating. Will you be there to pay when it's time to pay? And if you think about your insurance policies, you pay your premium today, but you don't know when the claim may occur or when you'll need to be paid. If you're injured on the job and you're collecting workers' compensation payments for years down the road, you want to hope that your employer insured with a strong company. And that's what the financial strength rating is there to do, is to make sure not only does the company have money today, will it continue to be there down the road? And we've looked at it from that perspective and trying to get an understanding of the level of innovation. And you mentioned the predictive analytics, and that was something, when I first started at AM Best, I remember a CEO coming in and telling me, it's like, we will never write an underwriting loss as long as I'm the CEO of this company. And all I could think is, man, I wish your underwriters would listen to you because I haven't seen an underwriting profit the whole time I've been following your company. And it was a matter of not having the data and not looking at it closely enough. Now, this is a very large company, but still, it's the importance of having the data at your fingertips, being able to follow what's going on in your business and walking through it. Um, not only for the CEO, and when you get the predictive analytics, do your underwriters have the data and the ability to look at things from a perspective beyond just, well, you had a loss last year or you didn't have a loss last year. And utilizing things such as predictive analytics to kind of say, what are the characteristics that may cause losses to occur? What are the type of things within those organizations? And when we first started working together, I mean, that's where predictive analytics started out. It was a huge benefit to anybody that had it relative to the competitors in the industry. But when you look down the road nowadays, if you don't have it, you're going to end up with all the bad business or a lot of bad business. So it becomes part of the things of companies find these ways to get ahead of their competitors, but at the same time, then they get caught up, and you always have to be looking for what's the next thing that's going to help you be better and serve your customers better and do a better job.
Yeah.
And that kind of led us into the whole innovation aspect of what we are looking at. Because I used to say when we started talking about innovation, is we've always evaluated your innovation. We just did it 15 years after you implemented the innovative idea, and we assessed you in terms of where it put you today. And as you mentioned, there's different levels of companies that are out there looking at through this. The insurance industry is enormous. When you think about the number of companies just in the United States alone, there are, the brand names that everybody knows, and there are some very small companies. And in some cases, those very small companies are very specialized in what they do and are very good at what they do, but they just, it's a small niche that they participate in.
Yeah.
The level of innovation that those companies and investment those companies put into innovation will vary. But you mentioned the point. It's very often, it's not about the level of investment as much as it's the culture of the organization. And do you have people that are constantly looking for ways to do things better? If you're always sitting there doing things the same way, you're going to end up doing the same things
Mhm.
all the time. You're not going to keep up with your peers, and you're not going to be the ones that are finding something like predictive analytics and getting out in front of the curve for identifying loss exposure or lack of loss exposure.
So as you
Uh,
looked at those companies,
mhm.
because you got to see them all,
Yep.
size, mindset, how did you kind of bucket like the different kinds of mindset that you would see? Because I'm
Yeah.
sure you started to see
Yeah.
some
I
patterns.
mean, you really kind of have those that are out in front always, and they have chief innovation officers. They have groups that are focused on, their job is to find the next best thing. So they're constantly, trying and failing and trying and failing and trying and finding the right answer and finding something that takes you to the next step. The key to innovation is the ability to, they always say, fail fast, and be willing to try things. But you also have companies that are right there behind them, kind of, they're going to react to things that are working for other companies. They're going to look to implement it and be the, kind of the next level
Kind of the fast
right
follower.
behind them. Exactly. Fast followers is a great way to say it. And then you have those that are, they'll do it, but they're going to do it on their own time. And, you know, they'll ultimately get to where they need to get to, and they'll continue to evolve, but it'll be slower. And then finally, you have companies that just are not innovative and aren't trying to be innovative, and those are the ones that do tend to fall by the wayside, and it shows up in their results over time. We just went through the whole aspect of severe weather
Mhm.
issues and the wildfire increasing and everything. So if you're somebody that's not changing what you're doing, whether it be how you're modeling things, how you're writing your policy, working through the risks that you're facing, you're going to ultimately end up with more losses than you do premium. And that's not a good thing for an insurance company. You're not going to be able to pay your bills down the road.
We
Um,
found it so
yeah.
much, and and I think between those, I think you name like kind of four different levels. You got the
Mhm.
the out in front innovators, you have the fast followers, you have the I'm cautiously going to move but slower than, and then
Yep.
I'm not moving. And I think we could spend probably three podcast episodes on how on earth you have the mindset of I'm not going to change. I think that's it's just super interesting. My experience in insurance working with Fallon is we saw companies start to move up, and become more open. So for the ones that are at the bottom, they're not moving, you can't even talk to them really.
Hmm.
But even for those ones that are cautious, I think we started over time to see those ones more cautious move into fast followers. And some of the fast followers move into like as they, start to understand the power of what some of this stuff can do. And honestly, I think the risk insurance is all about, managing risk, the
Yeah.
risk of status quo versus the risk of moving and being innovative. So when you think about kind of innovative cultures, the ones that have the potential to move, even if they're not in the first spot, but they're in one of those first three, what do you think those cultures have in common?
Well, it really is, um, one, it's leadership, and leadership has to be willing to accept failure. That's the most important thing for those that are the most innovative. And leadership that's engaged and encouraging people to look for ways to improve things. And that's really what it's all about, is looking for constant improvement. If you have a staff of employees that are constantly looking for better ways to do things, no matter what it is, it could be internal, it could be external, it could be product driven, it could be system driven and process driven. All those things are open to improve, and you can always be improving. Those are the most important things you have. Obviously, you have to invest. Sometimes you have to invest money in this. And one of the things that was interesting when we were implementing again, we had one of the companies ask us, well, I could spend all kinds of money. Does that mean I get a high innovation score? And the answer is no. I mean, we looked at it from input and output, and how did it benefit you? Was it what level of uh, innovative change did you have? Was it a significant change, or was it I went from paper to electronic filing? Honestly, for some companies,
No,
that's a big
huge
change. It's
deal.
important.
Yeah.
And the other aspect of innovation with the insurance industry, and you mentioned companies shifting through it. It's one of the reasons why we thought it was important. When you looked at all the changes in the amount of data that was out there, the speed of change, the internet, and everything that companies were dealing with, our view was, yes, you've been innovative over the years, but you also now you need to be more innovative and quickly, become, the speed of change is going to come faster and faster. So you have to be looking at this. And we really have seen companies that have changed, kind of picked up their culture and shifted from, the resistant, cautious company to the fast follower, so you saw it. And honestly, even the ones that have kind of said historical success, when, we've been successful, we don't need to change. One of the groups that talked to us was like, look, we've been writing business for 200 years. We don't need this. Why do we need to be innovative? We don't have a chief innovative officer. We don't have that. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you write automobile insurance, right? Well, you obviously have been innovative because you weren't writing that 200 years ago. So I think the people that started with the mindset of we're going to just live off our success of past years didn't even realize that, no, we can be innovative, and we have been innovative over years. That's why we've been successful for the last 200 years, and why we will be successful going forward, because we are willing to change and find different ways to do things to service our customers, provide a better product to our customers. And by bringing up the idea of innovation, it really made companies think and kind of shifted the mindset. And I do think it was a positive step for the industry, to push companies to look for ways to do things better.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you said, leadership matters. And as we kind of think about, I'm curious your thoughts on the mindset of the CEO,
Hmm.
but also it's the bottoms up and the top down. But how does a CEO's mindset actually facilitate that bidirectional, sort of culture that allows for that innovation to bubble up and to be, promoted and supported by its leadership?
Yeah. I mean, it really comes back to the accepting failure.
Mhm.
because if the CEO is might want to be innovative and say, let's try this thing, let's try that thing, but then when it fails, they're looking around at why did it fail, who was the reason it failed. You can't be looking for blame in an innovative culture.
That's
Uh,
so important.
it's because the people down below, the CEO has the mindset of, well, okay, I failed. I'm just going to get right back on it, keep moving forward. They're well above the line people that are coming up with ideas and trying to be innovative and find new innovative approaches. Those people don't have the same confidence,
Yeah.
and they need to be protected from, whether it be the CEO or senior management or middle managers that are looking for a scapegoat. That you can't have that in the culture. So it has to come down from the CEO as being failure's okay, and management failure is fine. Let's do it fast, but let's try and try to be innovative. And that those are the companies that we always saw the most successful when they had a CEO that was part of the team, not somebody up in the tower looking down and saying, well, who's innovative, who's not.
Yeah. When you look at most companies, and we're probably all guilty of this, we celebrate the wins. But for this to work, you actually have to thank the people for taking a risk and failing because it eventually led to some kind of a win.
Mhm.
Um,
It's kind of the mindset of, you know, you either win or you learn.
yeah,
You can't think of it as a loss. It's win or learn, and you learn from every failure.
yeah.
And those are that's kind of the approach you have to take to really build an innovative culture.
And it's easy to say, and for whatever reason, it's harder for companies to do. And I think that it's one of the telltale signs of whether you have a good culture. As we kind of transition from culture to more of what's going on with AI. I mean, we
Mhm.
saw this at Valen, and listen, AI is just a continuation of predictive analytics and data science. It's all part
Mhm.
of the same conversation. And when we talk about data, which we'll get to here in a minute, you can have selection bias in your data, and data can be biased in a lot of ways. We always said we had a selection bias in who our customers were because they were the ones willing to take a risk and willing to fail and willing to learn and didn't see it as a loss, to your point. So we always felt really blessed by the type of customers who wanted to work with us when it was those early days.
Right.
And that was a great benefit that we got. So we got to see, who in the industry was willing to take a risk because status quo was painful. I mean, we, as you know, primarily built a lot of the business helping workers' compensation insurers, and back in 2010, 2011, 2012, that was a line of insurance that was so unprofitable. It was
Yep.
just awful. And so it was the pain that moved them into acceptance of failure because you had to do something.
Exactly.
But then they learned, and they did have that culture, and they did have that mindset that we cannot keep doing what we are doing and expect a different result. So, I mean, culture is just such a huge part of what we experienced in terms of customers we could succeed with versus those that were tougher, to
Hmm. Yep.
move forward. So, from all this experience that, and this journey of predictive analytics from being novel to necessary, do you think AI is on a similar path here in insurance?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at kind of where people think about using it right now, and underwriting is one area you hear AI being, a tool that could be used and working through it. But at the same time, you have underwriters, and their job has been, to make these selections and make these decisions. And, everybody's first response is kind of like, well, I do it better because I, need to protect my job is really what the reasoning is for it. But, and everybody's kind of a little bit afraid. But then you have people above making some decisions saying we're going to try this, and it kind of forces people to understand and learn what drives AI. And simple fact is, a couple of things. One, you need good data. If you don't have good data to build, your AI models off of, and to run through the AI models, you're not going to do well. Kind of the garbage in, garbage out definitely applies.
Mhm.
But two, with that data, you need to start with good assumptions and you need somebody to interpret that. So you still need people to think about certain things and to feed the machine, so to speak, and then review what's coming out of the machine as well. You know, we've had models for years, and AI is just kind of a different form of a model. And, there's been times where those models have failed
Mhm.
and spectacularly. So if you're not reviewing and looking at it and saying, okay, that seems to be going off in the wrong direction in terms of how the AI model is working and the decision making that's coming out of it, what's the assumption in there that's pushing it that way?
Mhm.
So I think there's definitely going to be reticence from people who are worried about their jobs. But there's also reticence I've seen from regulators in terms of what are the assumptions behind these models. We need to understand them. Is there bias and bias that is unfair bias that's feeding these models? So you have to work through that process as well. And ultimately, the data. I think the data within the insurance industry, the quality of the data to feed the models is one of the bigger hurdles that the industry is going to have.
It so is, and you brought up so many good points there. So let's stay on the data one first. I mean, you've seen these data wars up close, and it's both volume and quality,
Mhm.
right?
And one other thing,
Yeah.
you may have it. Can you get to it?
Can you
You
access
can't
it?
even get
So
to it.
accessibility,
Yeah.
volume,
Yeah.
quality, right?
Yes. Right.
And these are data is hard. I mean, it is hard. I don't care what industry. Insurance, though, there's so much data. Lots of us say data rich but information poor
Hmm.
because either you can't get at the data or you've
Yeah.
acquired a bunch of companies and it's in different formats and you can't figure out how to bring it together. Or maybe you're newer and so you have better data but not enough. So as you kind of think about the data piece, because I think AI just puts a huge spotlight on data and it's hard for companies to invest in data projects because it's a little obtuse. Like, how long is it going to take? What's the
Very.
ROI from the data? Well, the ROI isn't from the data, it's what you do with the data after.
Right. Yeah.
And so
You
it
you
makes
can
it
build a great
difficult.
database if you don't use it. There's
Yeah,
zero.
yeah,
Um,
and it can make it hard, right, with the squeeze on profitability um, to invest. But I think with AI, it's like kind of really coming to a head.
yeah.
So, what do you think makes the data more trustworthy enough for AI to succeed?
Well, one of it is understanding the format even. I mean, to the point of you have multiple databases and and you're not sure about it. You really need to be comfortable with the format of how you're handling the data. Nowadays you have, data lakes and all these different
Lake
phrases.
house?
Yeah, lake house. I'm not a data person per se. I've just dealt with it enough to have heard those phrases, but the ability to access the data in the format that you need it is the driving piece to it. And too often there's so many different angles that you have to get to. So, what's the most important thing to make data make AI successful? It really is whatever your format is and whatever your approach is, it's got to be something where you can get to it in an efficient manner um, to drive these models forward. And most companies nowadays do not have it. It's all kind of, the old, kind of record based, and it's not in a format that's efficient. And that's the challenge that they face to get to, utilizing AI in the way it can be utilized in within their business.
It hopefully can speak to people that the human is not going to be out of this equation anytime soon, because there are so many data challenges that need to be governed, monitored, etc. In
Well, I
your
think just to
Yeah,
that point though
yeah.
is and I think the monitoring and the governing is the part that people forget, is you're still going to have that expertise and understanding of what we're trying to do with the model to make sure the model's working in the way it should.
Mhm.
And everybody thinks, oh, well, the model's just going to replace all these underwriters, are going to replace all these actuaries. And if you're not monitoring and seeing where it's taking you, it's ultimately probably going to take you down the wrong road.
Yeah. I mean,
And
model
you're going to
drift.
need people for that.
Yeah. Model drift is a big thing.
Yep.
And, there's still hallucinations in AI models. And I mean, there's so many things that the model's only as good as what we
Yeah.
feed it to your.
I mean, the I think it's the book Outliers that talks about how models and if you follow models, it actually does a better job than humans in eliminating the bias. In theory, it's going to work correctly, but ultimately those models are set up in a way that they kind of work similar to the way humans are, is that the data is going to drive you one way or the other ultimately. And down the road, you're going to need to just, tighten this or loosen that to keep the model going in the way in an unbiased manner.
You have to watch the models. So,
Yeah.
and you don't know how the machine's going to interpret different data points. And if you're not the backstop to the model, you really, the regulators should be all over you. Like,
Well, as I said, I think the regulators right now are one of the biggest hurdles that are out there
they are.
because of the concern over the assumptions and the concern over the data. And both are fair concerns. Until we really have a good idea. And the other aspect of, where's AI in the business, it's going to take time to get this to the point where it's really fully implemented into some of the business aspects to things. I'm sure there's companies out there who will say, well, I'm using it for A, B, and C,
Mhm.
and I'm sure they're doing fine with it. But as an industry overall, it's going to take time for this to be an accepted aspect, because of those hurdles. And you got to prove all these things out. You got to prove the assumptions. You got to show the data working, and you got to show how it works ultimately, because regulators are going to come back in and they're going to want to see the back testing behind these models and how it works, and ensure there's not bias behind it.
Well, and you as a company should want that before the regulators ask you.
Absolutely.
You should want it.
Absolutely,
You
because
have that's responsible use of AI. You have to.
because
You
that bias is, could be costing you millions.
have,
You don't know which direction it's taking you.
yeah, I know we've shared a story multiple times of a model we heard of. And this is where machine learning needs a human intervention. So there was a model about personal auto, and whatever the machine learned, it said if you were the age of 32 or 34, you were an okay risk, but if you were 33, somehow you were a bad risk. Well, that doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
There's something in the data that got it to drift in a certain way, and you got to figure out what it is and sort of correct it. One of the other things that's really important is how you embed analytics AI into human decision making. And I'm curious what you think is good ways you've seen about companies balancing what the model says with what experience tells them.
Well, I think to me that's one of the best ways to utilize things, things like AI models or predictive analytics and any type of modeling aspect is you still want to make sure there's, I think, I kind of view it as the human brain is still the most powerful tool that's out there as far as I'm concerned. And the model can drive you right to the correct answer. And that might be the correct answer. And all the person has said, yep, I agree. But somebody should be evaluating how it, what the answer was, provided, what output is there, and is it reasonable? Is it supportive? And if you can do that, there's no reason to change it. But if you can't do that, why isn't it reasonable? What are the things that you need to adjust and make adjustments off of that? So, I see companies that are utilizing things like, the predictive analytics, but also, putting AI on top of it to look at some of the loss aspects that might be out there beyond that. um, you can get to good answers that way that speed up the efficiency of what your underwriters are spending their time on.
Yeah.
There's you can be doing things with a machine and get you further down the line to the decision making, and that helps the customer. You're getting better service, faster decisions, and it's more efficient from the use of the expense you have for paying employees.
Well, and you're also taking away the pain points a lot of employees have about their redundant, repetitive tasks where they have to do it, but it doesn't really use their brain in the way they know that they can, and
Yep.
it can help you, right? It's so instead
Yeah.
of removing everyone's jobs, which is a fair, thing to ask about.
Well,
But I
I
think
mean,
more
we had to,
often than not, companies want to figure out how to get more with out of the people that they have and get them out of these mundane things.
yep. I mean, we had the same thing. I mean, when you look at, conducting a rating, we look at balance sheet strength. Well, that's what's on a company, what a company files in their annual statement every year, and
Mhm.
and they file it more often than that. But then you look at operating performance or the profitability of the company. Well, again, you can look at that out of the financials. So you could model each of those things right through, and then you get to the other issues of business profile. That's where we were looking at this process. Is there a way to model that? And certainly with AI, I'm sure there's a way to model that, and to get to the point where we could say to the analyst, you don't have to look at balance sheet strength, operating performance, business profile, and enterprise risk management and determine what the rating is and kind of assess each one of them. We want to build a model that assesses all of them together and gives you the answer. And then you decide, like I said before, is this an appropriate answer or why isn't it an appropriate answer? And there's so many other jobs out there that you could do that with, where you put these pieces together, and what you're trying to do really is fill in the holes where it's not a pure black and white, data, financial information type of answer. And I think that's what a lot of insurance companies are trying to do too. It's because, let's face it, they're trying to predict the future. How do
Yeah,
you predict the future in terms of the loss and the potential
that's the
loss?
job, right?
Yep.
And like many have said, we would say it's not about turning your brain off, it's about turning it up. So as you look at what's possible, what do you think are the most exciting applications of AI to really improve insurance pricing, products, claims, the customer experience? Like what gets you excited about what you think the opportunity is here for AI to help?
I think, in the loss control area, obviously, you can, because that's where it's going to help lower costs and it's going to help reduce loss.
And maybe
If you
explain what, for those non-insurance people, what
Okay.
loss control is.
Well, if you think of it in terms of underwriting and assessing risk, that's just basically assessing the risk for what it is. I.e., you have these characteristics, you're more or less likely to have a loss. It's going to cost the insurance company money. You're going to pay more in premium to cover that potential loss than somebody who has a lower potential for a loss. But in loss control and some of the aspects that are going on there, and the data that can be collected through wearables and basically the Internet of Things, there's a way to reduce the level of loss. And with loss control, that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to help an insured manage their, whether it's a business or their home, to reduce the potential for loss. And while insurance, you know, many different views of insurance, but insurance is really a risk transfer to take your risk and pass it to the insurance company. With loss control, the insurance company is helping you reduce your risk. So it's a risk avoidance as much as it is a risk transfer. And I think there's the information that's out there that can feed AI models will help. It'll help in the underwriting, but it'll also be able to push out information related to that, saying, well, here's why you're a higher risk. And if you do A, B, and C, you could be a lower risk. And we saw some of this, not really AI driven, but just basic model driven with the wildfires, where it's like, if you look around your house and I see all these trees and shrubs close to your house, if you cut some of those down and manage it
Mhm.
properly, you have a lower risk. Well, AI can take it, even further, and particularly work comp is one with wearables and things of that nature, where you may be able to really um, generate information that helps reduce loss for insureds.
You know what you're talking about is something we've talked about a lot, which is solving the main problem. People might wonder how do insurance companies not know how to price my risk relative to others? You have all this data. It is a lot harder than people think. And so what insurance companies have to do when they don't know is kind of go to the mean or the average, which means lower risk people pay for the higher risk people. And that
Hmm.
happens more often than people think or maybe can understand why. But there's something about the information asymmetry that occurs in an insurance. So the person or the company being insured knows the most about their risk, right? As a
Yep.
homeowner or as a business owner, I have the most information. Then if I'm using an insurance agent, they have whatever information I fed to them. I answered their questions, whatnot. They have less information than me, but they have more information. Then they hand just what the insurance company asked them for. So by the time it gets to the insurance company, they actually know the least about the risk in that value chain, right?
Right.
And so what you're talking about is actually solving that information asymmetry because I know from working with so many insurance companies, if you're lower risk, they want to give you the price that matches your risk. If you're higher risk, then you need to, compensate for that. But it's to the insurance company's benefit to right price the risk based on, what the exposure really is. And this kind of tooling, I think what you're saying, it can really move that ball forward
Yeah.
and
Well,
allow a more granular level of understanding of each policy risk.
yep. The tighter you can cut it, and part of the problem is you're talking about a very small likelihood of a loss.
Hmm.
But when you have a loss, it's a really big number.
Yeah.
So, that's what the issue is because, if you're off by 20% on your probability of loss, that might mean you said that you had a 0.6% chance of having a major loss versus a 0.5% chance of having a major loss. It's not a big, it's 0.1% you're missing by, but it's an enormous impact
Dollar
when you
value.
multiply it by the dollar amount because it's the severity and the frequency.
Yeah.
And people think in terms of frequency
Hmm.
of that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It did. I mean, I remember talking to reporters after 9/11, and the one question they had is, what's going to be the impact? And it's like, well, people are now cognizant of the idea of terrorism risk, and people are going to be willing to pay for that. How willing are they to pay for the insurance? Because, any decision basis is going to be based on the seller and what they'll sell the product for, and the buyer what they'll pay for the product. All of a sudden, when you saw something like that happen, it's like, oh, wow, that really can happen. I'm a lot more willing to pay for that.
Hmm.
And it ties back to when Progressive first started out. One of the things that differentiated them early on was they figured out one important aspect to DUI type of risks. If you had one DUI, you were much more willing to pay for the higher premium, but you were also really a pretty good driver because you didn't want that second one. And a lot of people make one mistake, but they don't make two mistakes.
And wasn't it also that it was like suburban dads that fell in that bucket a lot
Yeah, that you
because the fam,
coming home
yeah,
from the golf club
yeah,
made the wrong choice one time, but they're not going to make they're not going to do that again. But
yeah,
those are risks. You knew that they were better risks. Now, if you got the second one, now you're kind of more perpetual, and that they obviously a
yeah,
much different. You went into a different risk bucket,
yeah.
but that one time, it's in their brain, and they don't want to make that mistake again.
Well,
So
and the
it's
implications with
that's
their family and everything.
yeah.
It's like the price was higher than just the fines and the court. It was the impact to
Yep.
families, and you know what I
But
mean?
it just made them aware of it and
Yeah,
being aware of information like that. So that's where you kind of trying to get the seller and the buyer to get to the right price and understand the risk. And the more information that comes out of AI models will help the buyer understand the risk, and the the seller now has more data and better data. So both can understand the risk a little bit better. And I think you'll get a better match. And you'll also hopefully reduce the risk that's out there and why you're, and thus the premium levels. Because, let's face it, whatever's changing the climate, something's changing. I'm not going to get into the political aspect of climate change, but something's changing, and there's a lot more severe storms, and it's costing more and more money.
Mhm.
So we have to understand it. We have to understand what the risk is, how we can reduce it, and everybody's got to work together. Otherwise, costs are only going to continue to go up.
And when we look at an example of a progressive, for those not as familiar with the insurance industry, I don't care what industry you're in, they are one of the most forward-thinking, data-driven, analytic companies in any industry,
Yeah.
period. They
Hmm.
really do kind of lead the way with like the Capital Ones of the world. And, um, they've always been a data-first, analytics-driven organization. And so they have this really lovely looking flow who seems so nice and personal.
Yeah,
And shared the price of them and their competitors. Well, the reason Progressive shared those prices was because they used predictive analytics and they were so confident in their pricing that even if they were higher than the others, they would happily send your business to a competitor because they were so confident that the price wasn't adequate for the risk. So,
exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
But
it
I'm
seems nice. I
providing a
mean, she's,
service,
yeah, she's got
and
her apron.
they are providing a service though.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
right.
the thing. They're providing a service, and they're happy to see you walk down the street to the next carrier.
And they show what the power of sticking with data-driven decisions. They still have lots of employees and lots of
Yeah,
people who but it's fully embedded and it's just part of the culture. And
yeah,
it just seems like, that's kind of where we're going. So maybe as we want to pivot a little bit and talk about just advice for, I think a lot of, up and coming professionals, they might be individual contributors or in a management position, certainly have had, the digital, world since their beginnings, since they
yeah,
started out. But yet, they might actually be excited about AI, but also wondering how exactly it's going to impact their careers, that of their peers, what jobs go away, what jobs evolve. There's no question that there's winners and losers in any kind of tech revolution, but what advice do you have for younger professionals trying to navigate, AI while kind of building their own real world
right.
expertise?
Well, first thing I would say is know your company's policies because there's differences from company to company, and sometimes there's reasons for that. It might be regulatory or whatever in terms of how much can AI be included, and how much can you use it within your business and what you're working. But to the extent you're within policy guidelines, don't be afraid of AI. You know, try the tools that are out there, the free tools, and if your company's doing beta testing with AI and working through it, be part of that beta test. Be part of it and be included in that. So you're working towards it. It's always the important piece is learning, constant learning, and working towards what's going to happen down the future. If you're not learning about it, somebody else is, and somebody else is going to be ahead of you. And if I always look at it from what the employee can do for themselves,
Hmm.
but don't ever forget that you as an employee, whatever you do for yourself, you're doing it for your company too. And your company, if they're not valuing the fact that you want to learn and you're acting, you should probably find another company to work with because you want to be constantly learning. The other thing is, it's not like AI is going to be, overnight. It's this is going to be a process, and the point I'm making is be part of that process. Don't stay away from it, hide from it, be part of that process and learn and make sure you understand what's going forward with it. And I'm sure there's other ways to learn about AI, but always be part of it and connected to it within your organization.
Yeah. Figure out which business problems your company has and
Hmm.
which ones you're most suited to solve.
Yeah. I mean, that's I always used to say to our people, I basically outlawed the phrase this is the way we do, that's the way we do things.
Mhm.
I never want to hear that. It might be that's what you got to do to get something done in a quick period of time, but you should always be thinking about how you can do it better, faster, differently, because that's the way you improve constantly, and that's just part of the whole process. And if you're thinking about it from that perspective nowadays, part of that, how can you do it better, faster, includes could we utilize AI to do this?
Mhm.
And that's where if you're learning and staying connected and um, staying up on what's going on with AI, you might be able to find solutions that help your organization. And that only helps you within your career. And even if you fail, it helps you in your career.
It's a learning moment.
Yep.
It's a learning moment. And, maybe just from an executive perspective, what are you hoping to see from employees in terms of how they raise their hand and how they say, I want to help with this? Like, what do you think are the most effective ways where employees can kind of reach up and say, hey, I have an idea here. How can I get plugged in?
Yeah. And the important thing is it can't always be, I have an idea. I have an idea. Okay. Do you have how we should implement your idea?
Mhm.
Think it through before spitball, so to speak, and throw it against the wall and see, does this make sense? You need to have come to the table too with, I have an idea, and here's what I'm thinking. You might not have all the answers, but don't just come with the idea. I think it's important that you be part of the solution as well as raising, hey, I have an idea. We have a problem. That solution and the process by which you might change what you're doing is an important aspect to it. Again, you don't have to have all the answers, but if you can at least frame out what your thought is of why this idea might work, that's the most important thing you can do.
Yeah, include what here are the operational needs that I've identified, the ones I think that are going to be the most problematic. I might not have all the answers, but I've actually thought through what it would take from idea to
Yep.
implementation. And I'm
Yes.
coming with something that makes sense that people can then take in and say, oh, well, I could add something to that piece or that piece. But if you just say, here's a thought. Well, the
Yeah.
thought needs a bit more substance to it,
Yep.
right? For it to warrant the time of your bosses, right?
Yeah. And there's going to be times where your boss is going to say, you know what? No, it's not a good idea. I mean, I remember dealing with, somebody that made the comment that, they raised ideas and they never heard back. That's a problem on the management. But people also do have to accept, I had an idea, but I was told this is why it won't work. You know, there's a reason those people have been around, they have experience, and they also have some information, but they should explain it. You should always get an explanation back. Because if the answer is always no, then you don't have a very innovative culture. You don't have a culture that's going to try things and look to utilize the tools that possibly could be out there, such as AI. Um,
So once a no doesn't mean stop. If you're always getting a no, maybe it's a different company that you need to go to.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's just you have to kind of consider what you're hearing back, but it should be a reasoned explanation of, yes, go ahead, or no, here's why it probably would. And if you don't agree with that, then maybe kind of look at it from a different perspective. Maybe there's a different way to do it.
Yeah.
But it constant improvement is what people should always be striving for.
Yeah, one thing I always like to say is, when you think about your purview and what you're doing at work, and then your boss has this big a purview and their boss, it's just so much more that, when you get to executive level that you're thinking about. And so when someone can bring an idea that at least has substance and a framework to it,
Hmm.
that is something you'll pay attention to. Because
Yep.
you can't solve all these problems. And honestly, with AI, I think everybody's learning, including executives. And I think a lot of CIOs and CTOs, this isn't what they knew and
I
grew
mean,
up, right?
let's face it. I think executives have a steeper learning curve
Yeah.
than most because they don't have the time to potentially play around
Yeah,
and be part of the beta testing.
that's
I mean,
right.
we had beta testing going on when I was still at AM Best, but I didn't have the time to be part of that.
Yeah,
And other people did. And they clearly knew more than I did.
yeah,
So, that's where, you might have to provide a little bit more explanation to the higher executives so they understand it
yeah.
because, they're everybody's on a learning curve somewhere
They,
and different levels for different topics.
yeah, I think that's really critical. Um, you are super passionate, I think, about leadership and about culture and about young people thinking through their career. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd love to share kind of with the audience?
I mean, I think I hammered my biggest point of young people should look to constantly learn,
Mhm.
and how and by looking to find better ways to do things, you're going to learn, and you're either even if you get a no, you're learning why the answer was no. So when you look at your career, you're developing yourself if you're learning. And the more you develop yourself, again, that should be something your company cherishes in an employee, is an employee that's looking to learn and develop themselves only makes the company better. And if your company doesn't seem to value your desire to continue to improve yourself, then there's many companies out there, and especially within the insurance industry, it's an enormous industry, and there's a lot of good companies out there that people could work with. But um, I just think constant improvement for as an individual, you're constantly improving yourself, whether it's professional designations or learning on the job. And as an organization, you should be pushing your individuals to constantly improve, but you should also be looking for them to improve you as an organization.
Well said. So thank you, Matt, for spending this time with our audience today. And for those of you listening, this is meant to be a dialogue. So share in the comments what are some of the learnings that you've had as you've tried to do things in your organization, and leaders who have helped and leaders who it's harder to maybe get there with them, and what has your experience been like? We'd love to hear all that sort of feedback as we're having this conversation with today's leaders and tomorrow. So thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you, Kirsten.
Yeah, thank you.